The
How
air
can you
felt
sit there and
heavy,
lie after
charged
everything
with a
we've been through?
secret
I
I
want the
carried like a
truth now.
stone in my
This isn't about
chest.
the truth for you. It's about
$62 million.
control. I'm done
The number
talking.
still buzzed in my mind, unreal. Like a dream that might dissolve if I spoke it aloud. I'd won the lottery 6 months ago, a fluke. A single ticket bought on a whim at a gas station on Route 17. I hadn't told a soul. Not my wife, not my kids, not even my mother, who'd raised me alone through years of scraping by. Why? I wasn't sure at first. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was instinct, but something told me to wait, to test the waters before the world knew. So I did. I asked my family for help. Not as a millionaire, but as a man on the edge, desperate, broken. I wanted to see who they really were when the chips were down. What I found tore me apart and built me back up in ways I never expected. My name is Daniel Harper, and this is what happened when I played my quiet game with $62 million. The gas station receipt, crumpled in my pocket, was the only proof I hadn't imagined it. I'd checked the numbers 17 times that night, alone in my truck, parked in an empty lot under a flickering streetlight. My hands shook as I dialed the lottery office from a burner phone, my voice steady enough to claim the prize anonymously. The money sat in a trust, untouchable, while I went on living my life. Same old pickup, same faded jeans, same arguments with my wife Karen about bills we could now pay with a single signature. But I didn't sign. I waited. I watched. Karen was the first to know, not about the money but about my test. We'd been married 22 years, built a life on love and struggle, raising 2 kids. Ellie 19, sharp as a whip but distant, and Ryan 16, always lost in his phone. Karen was my rock, or so I thought, with her quick laugh and fierce loyalty. But lately cracks had formed. She'd been short-tempered, distracted, her eyes darting to her phone during dinner. I told her I'd lost my job at the warehouse, a lie that burned my throat. I said we were behind on the mortgage, that I needed her help to keep us afloat. Her face fell. Not with worry but with something colder, disappointment, maybe disgust. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was holding up. She just sighed and said, "We'll figure it out, Dan. We always do." Her words were hollow, and I felt the first sting of doubt. I pushed harder, testing the limits. I told her I'd borrowed money from a friend to cover the kids' school fees, another lie. I asked if she could pick up extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Her eyes narrowed and she snapped, "I'm already killing myself, Dan. What do you want me to do, sell the house?" I didn't answer. I just watched her storm out, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman I loved was still the woman I married. The kids were next. Ellie was home from college for the weekend, her nose buried in a psychology textbook. I caught her in the kitchen, pouring coffee, and laid out my sob story, jobless, broke, maybe losing the house. She froze, her mug halfway to her lips. "Dad, are you serious?" she asked, her voice sharp with panic. I nodded, letting the silence stretch. She didn't offer help, didn't ask what she could do. Instead, she started ranting about her student loans, her part-time job at a cafe, how she couldn't afford to bail us out. "I'm barely surviving myself," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to shake her, to ask where my little girl had gone, the one who'd once crawled into my lap and promised to take care of me when I was old. Ryan was worse. I found him in his room, earbuds in, scrolling through some game on his phone. When I told him we were in trouble, he barely looked up. "That sucks," he muttered, then asked if he could still get new sneakers for basketball. I stood there, stunned, waiting for something, anything to show he cared. Nothing came. The house felt emptier that night, the walls closing. And as I sat alone with my secret, $62 million, and I'd never felt so poor. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake, keeping the truth locked away. Maybe I was the one failing them, not the other way around. But I couldn't stop now. The test had begun and I needed to see it through. I started small, asking for favors, watching their reactions. I asked Karen to skip her book club to help me look for jobs online. She rolled her eyes, said she'd do it later, then left for her meeting anyway. I asked Ellie to chip in for groceries, just $20. She sent me a Venmo request for gas money instead. Ryan, I asked to mow the lawn to save a few dollars on a landscaper. He groaned, did half the yard, and left the mower in the rain. Each refusal, each shrug cut deeper than the last. I wasn't just testing them. I was breaking my own heart. But something else was happening too. I started noticing things I'd missed before. Karen's late nights at the hospital weren't always shifts. She'd come home smelling faintly of wine, her laughter too bright, too forced. Ellie's study sessions were often parties, her Instagram filled with photos of her laughing with friends while I sat home, drowning in my lie. Ryan's obsession with his phone wasn't just games, he was texting someone secretive, his face flushed when I asked who. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were falling into place. My family wasn't just failing my test, they were hiding something. I decided to dig deeper, not with lies but with the truth, or at least a version of it. I told them I'd gotten a lead on a job, but it was out of state, a last-ditch effort to save us. I said I needed their support, their trust to make it work. Karen's response was a curt nod, her eyes on her phone. Ellie said she'd think about it, then changed the subject to her summer plans. Ryan just shrugged, as if I'd asked him to pass the salt. I felt like a ghost in my own home, unseen, unheard. My $62 million a silent scream no one could hear. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more move, one more test, and it would change everything. The weight of my secret grew heavier each day, like a storm cloud swelling over our small weathered house. I'd walk past the kitchen where Karen was scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the blue glow, and wonder what she was hiding. I'd catch Ellie sneaking in late, her laughter muffled as she tiptoed to her room, and question if I'd ever really known her. Ryan's silence was the worst, his earbuds a barrier I couldn't breach. $62 million sat in a trust untouched, while I played this dangerous game, testing the people I loved most. I told myself it was about trust, about seeing who they were when the world pressed down on us. But deep down I was terrified of what I'd find. I pushed forward, my lies weaving a tighter web. I told Karen I'd gotten a call from the bank. Foreclosure was looming unless we could scrape together $10,000. Her face hardened and she didn't even look at me as she said, "Maybe you should have been smarter with money, Dan." Her words cut, not because they were true but because they weren't. I'd been careful, always scraping by to keep us afloat. Now, with millions hidden away, her accusation felt like a betrayal. I waited for her to soften, to offer a plan, but she just grabbed her keys and left for work. I knew better now. I'd seen the texts she thought she'd hidden. The ones from someone named Mark, full of emojis and late-night plans. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed more. Ellie was next. I cornered her one morning, her hair still damp from a shower, and laid it on thick. The house, the car, everything was slipping away. I asked if she could take a semester off, maybe work full-time to help. Her eyes widened, not with concern but with anger. "You're seriously asking me to drop out?" she snapped. "I'm not throwing away my future for this." She stormed off, leaving her coffee on the counter, steam curling into the air like a ghost of our conversation. Ryan barely registered the news. When I told him we might have to move, he just grunted, "Whatever, Dad," and kept scrolling. I saw a text pop up on his screen. Something about meeting someone at the park. He swiped it away fast, but not fast enough. My family was unraveling, and I was the one pulling the threads, or so it felt. Then came the twist, the moment that turned my quiet test into something else entirely. I was cleaning out the garage, looking for old tools to sell as part of my charade, when I found a box tucked behind a stack of tires. It wasn't mine. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten, addressed to Karen. My heart sank as I read the first one. They were from Mark, her coworker, not just a friend but something more, something that had been going on for months. The letters were raw, full of promises, weekends away, a fresh start, a life without me. My hands shook as I read, the words blurring through tears I didn't realize I was shedding. Karen, my Karen, was planning to leave me, and she didn't even know about the money. I sat there, surrounded by dust and cobwebs, wondering if I'd pushed her away with my lies or if she'd been drifting long before. I didn't tell her I'd found the letters. Instead, I doubled down. I told her I'd found a way to save the house, but it meant borrowing from her parents, something she'd always hated. I expected her to fight me, to push back, but she just nodded, her eyes distant. "Do what you have to," she said, and I knew then she was already gone, at least in her heart. I went to Ellie next, asking if she could talk to her grandparents, soften them up for the loan. She laughed, a bitter sound, and said, "Good luck with that, Dad. They hate you." It wasn't true, her grandparents had always been kind, but her words stung, revealing a resentment I hadn't seen before. Ryan, when I asked him to help with a garage sale to raise cash, just rolled his eyes and said, "I'm not selling my stuff." I was losing them, not to the lie of poverty, but to the truth of who they'd become, or maybe who they'd always been. I started following Karen, not proud of it but desperate. I saw her with Mark at a diner, their hands brushing across the table, her smile brighter than I'd seen in years. I watched Ellie at a party laughing with friends, oblivious to the family she claimed to love. Ryan I caught sneaking out, meeting a kid I didn't know, their conversation hushed and urgent. My test wasn't just revealing their hearts. It was exposing mine too. I'd spent years working, providing, thinking I was enough, but maybe I'd missed the signs. Maybe the money wasn't the secret. Maybe it was just a mirror, showing me the cracks I'd ignored. I decided to push one last time, to see if there was anything left to salvage. I called a family meeting, sat them down at the kitchen table, and laid out the final lie. I was sick, needed surgery, no insurance. It was a low blow even for me, but I needed to know. Karen's face went pale, but she didn't reach for me. Ellie started crying, but it felt performative, like she was acting the part of a grieving daughter. Ryan just stared at the table, silent. I waited, hoping for something. A hug, a promise, a spark of the family we used to be. Nothing. That night I sat alone in my truck, the same one I'd parked in when I checked those lottery numbers. $62 million, and I'd never felt so alone. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The kitchen table felt like a battlefield, the silence between us sharper than any knife. I just dropped the bomb about my supposed illness, a lie so heavy it made my stomach churn. Karen sat across from me, her hands folded tightly, her eyes fixed on a spot on the table. Ellie's tears had dried, leaving her face blank, like she was waiting for a cue. Ryan's earbuds were out for once, but he still wouldn't look at me. I'd pushed them to the edge with my test, and now I was waiting for a crack, a sign that they cared. But the silence stretched unbroken, and I felt the weight of $62 million pressing down on me. A fortune that couldn't buy what I needed most. I broke the quiet first, my voice low. "I need your help," I said, leaning into the lie. "The surgery's expensive. I don't know if we can cover it." Karen's lips parted, but no words came. Ellie shifted in her chair, her fingers tapping nervously. Ryan just shrugged, a small careless motion that hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream, to tell them about the money, to shake them until they remembered who we were. But I didn't. I waited, watching as the truth of their hearts came into focus. Karen was the first to speak. "We'll find a way, Dan," she said, her voice flat like she was reading a script. She didn't ask what was wrong, didn't ask how I was feeling. Ellie chimed in, her voice hesitant. "Maybe I can ask around, see if there's a fundraiser or something." It was something, but it wasn't enough. Not the fierce loyalty I'd hoped for. Ryan said nothing, just stared at his hands, and I realized he wasn't going to. The family I'd built my life around was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. That's when the real confrontation began. I couldn't hold back anymore. I pulled the letters from my jacket, the ones from Mark, and slid them across the table. Karen's face went white, her hands trembling as she recognized the handwriting. "What is this?" she whispered, but she knew. Ellie and Ryan looked confused, their eyes darting between us. I didn't soften the blow. "I found these in the garage," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You've been lying to me, Karen. For months." The room exploded. Karen stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "You went through my things?" she shouted, her face flushed with guilt and anger. I didn't back down. "You're planning to leave me," I said, my voice rising. "You think I wouldn't notice? The late nights, the texts, the way you look at me like I'm nothing." Ellie gasped, her hand covering her mouth, while Ryan's eyes widened, finally engaged. Karen's defiance crumbled, her shoulders slumping as tears welled up. "It's not what you think," she said, but her voice broke, and I knew it was exactly what I thought. The argument spiraled, years of unspoken resentment pouring out. She accused me of being distant, of working too much, of leaving her alone in our marriage. I fired back, saying I'd given everything to keep us afloat, to give her and the kids a life. Ellie tried to mediate, her voice shaking, but Ryan just sat there silent, as if he could opt out of the chaos. Then came the twist that broke me open. Ellie, in a quiet moment, admitted she'd known about Mark. Not the details, but enough. She'd seen them together at the hospital laughing too close. She hadn't told me because she didn't want to hurt me. I thought you'd figure it out, she said, her voice small. I stared at her, my daughter, my pride, and felt a new kind of betrayal. She'd chosen to protect her mother's secret over her father's heart. I wanted to rage, to walk out, but something stopped me. I looked at them, Karen crying now, Ellie wringing her hands, Ryan finally looking up, his eyes wet, and saw not just their failures but mine. I'd been testing them, but maybe I'd been testing myself too. Had I been there enough? Had I listened? The money, the 62 million, felt irrelevant now. I couldn't fix this. I took a breath, my voice softer now. I need to know if we're still a family, I said. If we're worth fighting for. Karen reached for my hand, her touch tentative, but I pulled back. Not yet. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not when the wounds were still raw. The confrontation ended without resolution. Just a heavy quiet as we all retreated to our corners of the house. I sat in my truck that night, the lottery ticket stub in my hand, and wondered if I'd pushed too far. The test had revealed more than I'd bargained for. Karen's affair, Ellie's silence, Ryan's detachment, but it had also shown me something else. They were still here, still in the house, still tied to me, however frayed the threads. I didn't know if that was enough, but it was something. I decided to give them one last chance, not with lies but with the truth. I'd tell them about the money, lay it all bare, and see what they did with it. Not tonight, though. Tonight I needed to sit with the pain, to let it sink in. The storm was coming, and I wasn't sure any of us were ready. The house was a pressure cooker. Each creak of the floorboards a reminder of the secrets we were all carrying. I'd confronted Karen about Mark, laid bare the letters that proved her betrayal, and the fallout had left us raw, exposed. Ellie's admission that she'd known about her mother's affair hung in the air like smoke, choking any chance of trust. Ryan's silence was its own kind of wound, his indifference a blade I hadn't expected. $62 million sat in a trust, a fortune I'd kept hidden to test my family, but now it felt like a curse. I'd pushed them to their limits and they'd pushed back, showing me a side of them I wasn't sure I could forgive. But I wasn't done. I couldn't walk away, not when there was still a chance to salvage what we had. I decided to tell them the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough to shake them awake. I called another family meeting, this time in the living room, the same worn couch where we'd once watched movies together, laughing until our sides hurt. Now it felt like a courtroom. I stood pacing as Karen, Ellie, and Ryan sat, their faces a mix of guilt and defiance. I haven't been honest with you, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. I didn't lose my job. I'm not sick. But we are in trouble. Not with money, but with us. Karen's eyes narrowed, confused, while Ellie leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Ryan for once put his phone down. I went on, spinning a half-truth. I got a bonus at work, a big one. Enough to change things. But I need to know if we're still a family, if we can fix what's broken. I watched their faces, searching for a spark, something to hold on to. Karen was the first to break. What are you saying, Dan? She asked, her voice sharp. You've been lying to us? Playing some kind of game? I nodded, not backing down. I needed to see who you are when things get hard. And what I saw, I paused, my throat tight. What I saw broke my heart. The room erupted again, this time with accusations flying both ways. Karen stood, her face flushed, yelling about trust, about how I'd betrayed her by doubting her. Ellie joined in, her voice cracking as she defended her silence about Mark, saying she was protecting the family. Ryan, to my surprise, finally spoke. You think we're the problem, Dad? You're never here. You're always working, always gone. His words hit like a punch, and for the first time I saw myself through their eyes. A man so focused on providing that I'd forgotten how to connect. The argument peaked, voices overlapping, until Karen dropped a bombshell that stopped us all cold. I was going to leave, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Not because of Mark, but because I don't know who we are anymore. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and I saw not just guilt but pain, years of it, buried under the weight of our routine. Ellie sobbed, reaching for her mother, while Ryan stared at the floor, his hands clenched. I wanted to hate her, to walk away, but something in her voice held me back. She wasn't just confessing, she was asking for a way back. I didn't know if I could give it to her, but I wanted to try. The fight drained out of us, leaving a fragile silence. I sat down, my hands shaking, and said, I want us to start over. No more lies. No more secrets. I didn't tell them about the 62 million yet, that was too big, too raw. But I promised to be honest, to listen, to try. Karen nodded, her hand brushing mine, a tentative gesture. Ellie wiped her eyes, whispering, I'm sorry, Dad. Ryan just looked at me, his expression softer, and I took it as a start. The next few days were tense but different. Karen canceled her plans with Mark, her phone quiet for the first time in months. Ellie started talking to me, not just about school, but about her fears, her dreams. Ryan even helped with the dishes one night, a small miracle. I began to see glimmers of the family we'd been, but I knew the real test was coming. I had to tell them about the money, the whole truth, and see if it would break us or bind us. I planned it carefully, choosing a quiet Sunday morning, the kind we used to spend together over pancakes and coffee. I sat them down, my heart pounding, and started with the truth I'd hidden for 6 months. I won the lottery, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. $62 million. The room went still, their faces frozen in shock. Karen laughed, a nervous sound, thinking it was a joke. Ellie's jaw dropped, her eyes wide. Ryan, for once, was speechless, his phone forgotten. I laid it all out, the ticket, the trust, the reason I'd kept it secret. I told them about the test, how I'd wanted to see who they were without the money clouding things. Their reactions were a mix. Karen's eyes filled with tears, Ellie's with anger, Ryan's with something like awe. Why didn't you tell us? Karen asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her, at all of them, and said, because I needed to know if we were enough without it. The truth hung between us, heavy and sharp, and I waited to see what they'd do with it. The living room was a crucible, the air thick with the weight of my confession. $62 million. The words had slipped out, raw and real, and now they hung between us, a bomb waiting to detonate. Karen's tears glistened in the morning light, her hands twisting in her lap. Ellie's face was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, maybe even relief. Ryan, for once, was fully present, his eyes locked on me, wide with something I couldn't quite name. I told them about the lottery, about the test, about my fear that money would change us before I knew who we really were. Now I waited, my heart pounding, for the fallout. Karen spoke first, her voice trembling. You lied to us, Dan. For months. You let us think we were falling apart. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I did, I admitted, meeting her gaze. But you lied too, Karen. About Mark, about wanting to leave. We've all been hiding. She flinched, her tears spilling over, but she didn't argue. Ellie jumped in, her voice sharp. You tested us like we're some experiment? That's not fair, Dad. You can't just play with our lives like that. I nodded, taking the hit. Maybe it wasn't fair, I said. But I needed to know if we could survive without the money. If we were still us. Ryan, quiet until now, finally spoke, his voice low. So what now? You're rich, and we're supposed to just be okay with it. I looked at him, my son, so distant for so long, and saw a flicker of the boy who used to beg me to play catch. I don't know, I said honestly, but I want us to figure it out together. The conversation spiraled, emotions crashing like waves. Karen admitted she'd felt trapped, not by me, but by the grind of our life, the endless bills, the fading dreams. Mark had been an escape, a mistake she regretted. Ellie confessed she'd been scared, not just of losing the house, but of losing herself in a family that felt broken. Ryan, in a moment that cracked my heart open, said he'd been hanging out with the wrong kids, trying to fill the void of a father who was always working. Each truth was a knife, but it was also a thread, stitching us back together piece by painful piece. We talked for hours, the longest we'd spent together in years. No phones, no distractions, just us, raw and real. I told them I didn't want the money to define us. I proposed a plan, not to spend it wildly but to use it wisely. Pay off the house, secure the kids' education, maybe take a trip together like we used to when they were little. Karen reached for my hand, her touch warmer now, and said, I want to try, Dan. For us. Ellie nodded, her eyes still wary but softer. Ryan just said, okay. But it was enough. The money, once a secret that divided us, was now a bridge, fragile but real. But the collapse came as I'd feared it might. A week later, word got out. I don't know how, a slip at the lottery office, a nosy neighbor, a careless comment, But suddenly the world knew. Reporters camped outside our house, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years called, their voices dripping with false concern, asking for favors, loans, a piece of the pie. The kids' school buzzed with gossip, and Ellie came home crying, humiliated by whispers about our wealth. Ryan got into a fight with a kid who called him a rich brat. Karen's coworkers treated her differently, some with envy, others with pity. The money I'd kept secret to protect us was now a spotlight, exposing us to a world I wasn't ready for. I tried to hold us together, to remind them of the plan, but the pressure was relentless. Karen started pulling away again, her old fears resurfacing. Ellie retreated to her room, her trust in me shaken. Ryan went back to his phone, his brief openness gone. I felt the family I'd fought for slipping away, and I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd tested them, but maybe I'd failed the real test, knowing when to let go of my own control. I sat them down again, this time with no lies, no tests. I messed up, I admitted, my voice breaking. I thought I could control this, but I can't. The money's ours, but it's not us. I need you to help me figure out how to live with it. Karen looked at me, her eyes tired but clear. We'll figure it out, Dan, she said, echoing her words from months ago, but this time they felt real. Ellie reached for my hand, a small gesture that meant everything. Ryan nodded, his face softer than I'd seen in years. The collapse wasn't the end, it was a reckoning, a chance to rebuild on truth. We started small, setting boundaries with the press, donating anonymously to causes we cared about, planning that trip we talked about. The money was there, but it wasn't the answer. We were. The world outside our house was a circus, a relentless hum of cameras and questions that followed us like a shadow. $62 million had turned us into a spectacle, our quiet life ripped open for everyone to see. I'd wanted to protect my family, to test their hearts before the money changed us, but now the secret was out, and it was changing us anyway. Karen's face was drawn, her smiles rare as she navigated whispers at the hospital. Ellie hid in her room, her confidence shaken by classmates who saw her as a walking dollar sign. Ryan's brief moment of connection had faded, his earbuds back in, his world closed off. I'd thought the truth would set us free, but it had built a new cage, one made of public scrutiny and private doubts. I walked through the house at night, the creak of the floorboards a reminder of the life we'd had before. Simple, flawed ours. Now every decision felt weighted, every choice a potential landmine. I told them about the money to bring us together, but it was pulling us apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. I tried to hold on to the plan, pay off the house, secure the kids' future, take a trip, but the world wouldn't let us. Letters arrived daily, some begging, some threatening, all wanting a piece of what we had. Old friends reappeared, their voices syrupy with nostalgia, their hands outstretched. I wanted to scream, to tell them all to leave us alone, but I knew it wouldn't help. The money was a magnet, drawing out the worst in people, and I feared it was drawing out the worst in us too. Karen and I fought more, not about Mark anymore, but about the future. Should we move? Should we give it all away? Should we hide? Ellie started skipping classes, her grades slipping, her anger at me bubbling over in sharp, cutting words. Ryan got caught sneaking out again, this time with kids I didn't trust, their influence stronger than mine. I felt like I was losing them all over again, and the $62 million, once a secret I controlled, was now a force I couldn't. But there was a moment, small but bright, that gave me hope. One night, after another day of dodging reporters, Karen found me in the garage, where I'd retreated to escape the noise. She sat beside me on an old crate, her hand resting on mine. "I'm scared, Dan," she said, her voice soft. "But I don't want to lose us." It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. I squeezed her hand, and for the first time in weeks we talked not about the money but about us, about the kids, about the life we wanted. It was a lifeline, thin but real. The next day I took a risk. I called a lawyer, not just to protect the money but to protect us. We set up a trust, not just for the millions but for our family, a plan to keep us grounded. We donated to a local shelter anonymously, and it felt like a weight lifted, a way to make the money mean something without letting it define us. Ellie came to me one morning, her eyes red but determined. "I want to help," she said. "Not just with the money but with us." She started therapy, something I hadn't known she needed, and it opened a door to conversations we'd never had. Ryan too began to shift small steps, helping with chores, talking to me about school, even laughing once, a sound I'd missed more than I realized. The collapse wasn't total. It was a breaking open, a chance to rebuild. We started planning that trip, not to some exotic place but to a cabin in the mountains like we used to when the kids were young. No reporters, no phones, just us. The night before we left, I found an old photo album in the attic. Pictures of us camping, laughing, whole. I showed it to Karen and we sat on the couch, the kids joining us, their voices soft as we remembered who we were. The money was still there. A shadow we couldn't ignore, but it wasn't everything. We were learning to live with it, to let it be a tool, not a master. The trip was a turning point. In the quiet of the mountains we really talked about our fears, our mistakes, our hopes. Karen admitted she'd been lost, not just in Mark, but in herself, and she wanted to find her way back. Ellie shared her dreams of becoming a therapist, using our pain to help others. Ryan, in a rare moment, said he wanted to be better, to be part of us again. I told them I wasn't perfect, that I'd made mistakes with the test, with the secrecy, but that I loved them more than anything. We cried, we laughed, we sat by a fire under a sky full of stars, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were a family again. The money hadn't saved us, but it hadn't destroyed us either. We had. The mountains gave us a chance to breathe, to remember what it felt like to be us, not just a family with $62 million, but a family, period. The cabin's wooden walls held our laughter, our tears, our tentative steps toward healing. Karen's hand found mine by the fire, her touch no longer hesitant. Ellie's smile was real again, her plans for the future brighter than I'd dared hope. Ryan, still quiet, started opening up, his words few but heavy with meaning. The money was there, always there, but in those moments it felt small compared to what we were rebuilding. Back home the world hadn't changed. Reporters still lingered, though their numbers dwindled as newer stories took their place. The letters kept coming, but we learned to sort them, to give where it mattered, to say no where it didn't. We weren't perfect, there were still arguments, still doubts, but we were trying, and that was enough. I started seeing a therapist too, something I'd never thought I'd do. It helped me unravel the knot of guilt and fear I'd carried since that night in the truck, when I'd first seen those winning numbers. I'd tested my family, pushed them to breaking, but I'd also tested myself, and I was learning to forgive us all. Karen and I began couples counseling, a space to rebuild trust, to talk about Mark, about my lies, about the years we'd let slip by. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that was a start. Ellie threw herself into her studies, her passion for helping others a light I hadn't seen in her before. Ryan joined a basketball team, not for the sneakers but for the game, and I was there at every practice cheering him on. The money became a tool, not a burden. We paid off the house, set up college funds, donated to the shelter where Karen volunteered. We didn't move to a mansion or buy fancy cars, we didn't need to. The life we had was enough now that we were living it together. One night, months later, we sat around the kitchen table. The same one where I dropped my lies, my truths, my fears. We were planning the next trip, maybe to the coast this time, and the kids were laughing, tossing ideas back and forth. Karen looked at me, her eyes soft, and said, "We're okay, Dan." It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was everything. I reached for her hand, and she let me hold it, her fingers warm against mine. The $62 million had tested us, nearly broken us, but it had also shown us what mattered. We weren't defined by the money, or by the lies, or by the mistakes we'd made. We were defined by the choice to keep going, to fight for each other, to love even when it hurt. I looked at my family, their faces lit by the soft glow of the kitchen light, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The test was over and we'd passed, not perfectly but enough. The world outside could keep its cameras, its questions, its demands. We had each other, and that was worth more than any fortune. I smiled, my heart full, and knew we'd be all right. The end.